A long time ago, a young engineer decided that he should write a manifesto of purpose. That manifesto of purpose was within the walls of Chevrolet division at General Motors. And as I understand it, that initial memo has almost spot on. I could read it, but it would sound as if it was something out of the Twilight Zone, because it was so spot on to the particular point where we are in the industry today, with a number of aftermarket parts, the availability of those parts, factory commitment, and it was all written from a young engineer who simply wanted to do his job better. And that job was attempting to lead some portions of the engineering staff in special projects, and it encompassed all sorts of things about performance of Chevrolet vehicles, how they stood in the marketplace, and where they fit and where they should fit up to present day time. A young engineer again today has been given the task of writing a similar letter, a manifesto of purpose. That young man's name is McPhail, and he has been given the manifesto of purpose target to write, quote, another Duntov letter, unquote. I would like to say several things about this man, but most of you already know a great deal about this man. The interviewer will be Jim McFarland. These fellows have been friends for, 26, 7, 8, 30 years. And they've always been very close on projects, and we thought it specifically appropriate that we have opportunity to listen to a conversation of history, of presence, and of future. So if you will, all we're going to do is eavesdrop. Zora Arkus Duntov, as interviewed by Jim McFarland.
Early 1950, and as I recall, you were working for and had driven for the Allard Company in England, and in fact you'd been in one Le Mans race in an Allard, and were approaching a second, and there was a general of the armies in England who was a friend of yours who had also purchased some Allards. Do you recall his name?
General Griswold.
General Griswold.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, General Griswold was also a friend of Ed Cole,
yeah,
who was the president of Chevrolet.
Chief engineer.
Chief engineer. And you had indicated perhaps an interest, and he had suggested, General Griswold, that you should have an interest in maybe coming to work for Chevrolet. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Don't be too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so long story short, you wound up deciding that coming to the United States might be a better place to live than in England. Elfie certainly thought so.
Yeah.
And so you eventually came to work for Chevrolet.
Yes.
But you were only a couple of weeks away from your second race at Le Mans in an Allard. How does Chevrolet feel about that? You were going to another Le Mans race in an Allard while you were now working for Chevrolet.
Well,
Sticky.
My boss, Maurice Orley, dead set against it. I asked to take the chief engineer, Ed Cole, maybe hour or maybe hour and a half. Ed Cole dissuaded me, but I promised to drive the race and no way back.
So you went?
But I will.
Okay. Then you came back to Chevrolet to go to work. And shortly thereafter, I believe it was in December of '53, was when you wrote the infamous memo that Harold's referring to. Why don't you share with us what happened after you wrote that memo?
Nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Nothing happened, eh?
But you made a statement, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, first, I was employed by research and development, working for Maurice Oley. And at that time, I have particular interest to Corvette, and took this assignment without any thought what will come from this.
Fuel injection came along there too pretty quickly, didn't it?
No, not so quickly. Not so quickly.
But you did begin working with some of the early Corvettes. In fact, you mentioned you had one, a '53, that had the wooden grill, or the...
Yeah. One of 3 built pre-test, and my car has a wooden grill, imitation of paint silver. And on this car I developed suspension component change, rear spring inclination, 2-degree positive caster in front, remove excessive understeer from rear, and remove oversteer in front.
So you continued working with a small block.
Okay. Small block, it was originally it was thought to be 255 engine. And while working for GM, I was interested in engine. And I sell at Cole. He was a brilliant, intuitive engineer. A 55 engine bearing cannot bearing.
This was when the Moraine 400 series came.
Yeah. And Moraine 400 did not help, still main bearing did not hold. Then Ed Cole decided to groove only upper part of your bearing. And that feature stayed until today. It's a groove only upper part of the bearing and full bearing, bottom bearing. And I don't know any engine exists than our small block Chevrolet.
And the valve train came from Pontiac.
Yeah.
Okay, this is 1955. Let's jump over here to a little anecdotal situation for a second. You were responsible for, after the Pikes Peak race that year, developing a certain performance levels for a couple of 55, 56 disguised small blocks, and you and Elfie came to Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
You want to describe that covert effort you had going there, how you were disguising what was going on?
Well, our advertising agency in sales decided I should play a role of a crazy millionaire. And I moved Broadmoor. At that time, it was very luxurious.
At the Broadmoor?
Broadmoor,
Okay.
yeah. And I live up to the hills. Bottle of wine every night at dinner, and
By the pool and...
pool, planter punch in the pool.
But you were up at 3 o'clock in the morning every morning
Yeah,
with Elfie.
3 o'clock, yeah, actually 2 o'clock, I don't know. But to be on the starting line for Pikes Peak, sitting, shivering, Elfie and Al Rogers. Al Rogers was a four-time win Pikes Peak race, champion car. They said in the brown bush, headline toward the starting line, and I'm sitting in the starting line and awaiting when the high appearance to the daylight. I watch my headlight disappearing. Then I go, okay. At that time, all the tourists was already in Pikes Peak.
So Elfie's halfway up the hill watching for people coming down while you're going up.
Yeah, and the reasoning was, if I encounter, if they spotted tourists coming down, then full bore, they descending toward the starting line, and I'm already in full bore, climbing. But reason was to do that, I did not know. That didn't make any sense. Collision, but that was the arrangement.
But I remember that the object was that you were going out early in the morning,
Yeah.
testing and setting up these cars for a period of 5 weeks, in fact, and then you
Yeah.
and Elfie would come back down, hide the cars locally, go back to the Broadmoor, and be playboys the rest of the day.
Right,
That's what I thought. Okay.
And by the way, my expense account was rejected. Simply engineer and entertainment? No.
Okay, let's leapfrog over something here. There's been a lot of talk over the years about the Duntov camshaft. If I recall correctly, that originally came from the work you did with the Arden heads.
Yeah.
And it was an asymmetrical lobe,
Yeah.
very quick opening, very slow closing, and you simply took that concept into a cam for the small block Chevrolet.
Right.
What was the reception by Chevrolet engineers when you did that?
Duntov cam never work.
So no acceptance.
And I sat in Arizona in preparation for speed run in Daytona Beach, and I know I lacked maybe 20 horses to reach 150 miles average, and waiting like cat on the tin roof, and calling Detroit. My Camshaft is ready, send me. They are ready, but we have to run on dyno. What makes sense to run on dyno? If the camshaft work, That's all right. If not work, my name is Mud, and well, fortunately it was work.
Guess what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. Later on in your career, the early career there into the 50s, and if I recall, the W engine, the 348 became your responsibility. And the small block as we knew it then had pretty much been maxed out, and it was time to do some big block work. And that was your project. And Buck Baker entered in that somewhere, I think, was it not?
Okay. In summer of '58, I was on vacation, and I get a call from Rosenberger. He was assistant chief engineer, and tell me that Ed Cole liked you to develop W engine, our track engine, racing engine. Okay, I shot my vacation back to Detroit. Oh, no. Then he also told me, visiting with Buck Baker, it's the father of today's Baker, at Trenton Speedway. Okay, I sit on the grandstand in the Trenton.
He said someone was going to meet you there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And soon, uniform man, mechanic uniform, but clean, sat along me and asked for light. I give him light. And he said, well, try to follow me, that not right away. Keep me inside and follow me. I did. Outside of the grandstand was a car, door open, and I sat in the back seat. And car, maybe 100 yards away, stopped. And then Buck Baker climbed the car, and we discussed how we'll do that. Like he will run the car, and everything that's broken I will be replacing with better part, and Speedy Thompson poked his nose, and Baker introduced me. That's Mr. Brown, and
you were Mr. Brown.
Yeah, Speedy chin, but okay. That was mid '58. Engineering was not involved. Sales was involved. And I get $25,000 from sales. And for this $25,000, I buy 5 cars. And distribute them to people that I see fit.
These are NASCAR drivers.
Yeah. And Jim Ratman was assisting me, and we were sitting in the Miami and telephone, and Jim calling each driver, explain. And I listen to the other side, and if I feel that his response was enthusiastic or not enthusiastic, okay, we get 5 drivers that were Buck Baker and Jim Reed, short track driver.
Curtis Turner?
No.
Curtis Turner?
Curtis Turner and Jim and Wetterly, Joe Wetterly. But I'm not sure, because he whatever, a five driver and heavy duty part supplied by Jim Ratman. And as the racing fraternity go, Jim Smith, another driver, NASCAR driver, you know that 5 cars switching to Chevrolet, and also he has a desire to buy a Chevrolet. And I explained Jack Smith, his was name, and 6 car, but he bought it with his own money. And when he found out that the other driver get car for free, and he was pay his money. I don't know how I can get you reasoned with him. But at any rate, he was a 6 car having. It was opening Daytona, and 2 preliminary races, I think. 1, 2, 3 Chevrolet, and second preliminary race 1, 2, 3 Chevrolet. It's terrific. And Daytona 500, all 6 car on the pole, but all 6 car has a chain, more chain driving camshaft, failing. And I find out that although structurally Morse chain was much better, and the reason that I select Morse chain, but link chain was more flexible. And since one day, all the Chevrolet was running on the link chain. And following 60, Junior Johnson driving, we won Daytona. Overall NASCAR championship was Chevrolet, Rex White.
Well, those engines really were the outgrowth of the 348, which you turned into the 409.
Yeah.
And then, which pretty much culminated that period. But again, you'd maxed out the W engine, and so the Porcupine head came next. And that was about the time you were responsible for most of their racing activities, were you not?
Yeah. I was responsible for racing activity until 91 and 92. And after that, Vince Piggins, maybe you know him. Vince Piggins took over racing activity. And he was responsible for drag racing long before that. Like Z11 at Vince
Let's go back and just briefly take a look at some of your involvement with the Corvette. You've been credited for an awful lot of its development, a lot of its progress. While you did get involved early on with the Corvette, you didn't really become that immersed in it until into the 60s, as I recall, late 50s, early 60s.
I was director of high performance in 63, but then I was chassis and engine for Corvette. Simply developing engine for Corvette, and then a year later pieces appear in the passenger car. It's like trial. Yeah.
Well, coming on up more to more recent times, you retired in 75?
75, yeah.
And prior to that time, about your last major effort with the Corvette was 74, I believe. In fact, you had a 74.
Yeah.
Which I think maybe you recently, you sold the car.
Yeah.
Offer you couldn't refuse, I believe you said. Yeah. Can you imagine? You said a couple of things recently that I think bear mentioning. Your involvement with the Corvette, all those years, while it was your job, you were engineering it, you were directing it, but it was a youth-oriented, basically, vehicle. And you had some reasons why you stayed involved with the Corvette besides just corporate reasons.
Hot rodder, that was my interest, to provide pieces. Via Corvette to passenger car. All cylinder head design in Corvette involves aluminum head, large valve, flow bench testing, and I think 327 engine has all complement of my contribution to engine, small block engine. The intake was 2 inches and 0.2 and exhaust 1.6, and
well, of all the small block displacements that you worked with,
yeah,
which would you say were the 1 or 2 most efficient displacement versus output?
302 and 327.
Well, you mentioned something else recently about your concern about the hot rodders, and the Corvette gave them something to work on. It gave them something to work toward in owning. And so there was some concern besides just selling cars about youth activities.
Yeah.
That's something I don't think has come to the forefront, which kind of gets us up more contemporary. You've seen a number of things at this conference. You've consulted quite a bit around the world since you retired in 74. We've talked a little about computers and electronics. Can you share some of your feelings about where we are now and what's going to be needed in the near and long term?
Well, listening to SEMA presentation, I think everybody should scratch their head. By the way, I attend one lecture here. It's a perfect circle. Yeah, perfect circle. And I listen.
Seal power?
Huh?
Seal power? Talking about the piston ring?
Yeah.
Seal power?
Seal power, okay. Not perfect circle. Okay.
Close.
Close. By the way, I don't know who, either Seal Power or another outfit, Molly ring, piston ring.
Well, the small block started out with that.
Huh?
The Molly top ring was in small block V8 Chevys very early.
Yeah.
Right.
But I introduced that.
You were the one that started it.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, while listening to interesting presentation, thought crossed my mind back in 41. Midget. I know midget driver, and he related me a story. Before preliminary heat, he by the name of Len Woofsy, and he was last. And by being the last, also he broke a piston. Time was at premium, ran out to wrecking yard, looking for V860 piston, and find one with rings. He shoved in the engine and was ready to race, and that was inverted start. He was leading the race, and nobody passed him. He won the race, championship race, and at that time, Speed Sport News was very small publication, if any. And he, in the winter, he started track from New Jersey down south, and every time he sold winning midget, the won championship. He sold it, then round up some another wreck, sold second winning midget. I don't know how many midget he sold, but
well, what are the plans for Zora now?
I like to say age gracefully, but you know.
Okay, thank you.